Welcome back to the Critics Corner. I'm Andrew Branca with the Waxahachie Sun. I'm here with David Dunn with Southlake Style Magazine, and we've definitely are stepping back from doing new releases here today and kind of doing something a little bit different. I know everybody is all tied up with the Marvel craze, whether they're good movies or bad movies or kind of in between. You yourself, I mean, you've bought, merch. I mean, that's committed, I guess. I don't know if that's good.
I have my makeshift David Dunn Avengers right here in my apartment.
Yeah, the unavengers there. So,
Don't you dare call Spider-Man an unavenger. He's been inaugurated since Infinity War.
Well, whatever. The last few movies they've put out haven't been that great. So,
Excuse you, No Way Home was amazing.
Well, apart from that, but I mean,
there you go. Okay.
In the series of Marvel movies, they've had a number of duds.
Okay, fair enough.
That's what I was getting at.
We definitely have to name drop Eternals in there, but continue.
Yeah, exactly. So we're looking at a film that really predates this Marvel craze, and I kind of like it personally. They were one of the comic books that I read quite a bit. It's the Watchmen. It came out a number of years ago. I think it got a kind of a little bit of a bad rep a little bit, and just really was underappreciated when it came out in 2009. And it's honestly one of the best movies out there regarding superheroes and villains and different realities from that they're in and stuff like that. I think it's actually pretty good. So why don't you fill our viewers in on this flick here?
Yes, sir. So based off of the graphic novel, the iconic graphic novel by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons, Watchmen features a group of retired superheroes who have been outlawed from superheroing activity. The government said, hey, you're doing vigilante stuff. You can't do vigilante stuff anymore. So they went into retirement, or they went to work for the government, or in some cases, they decide to continue their crime fighting illegally, breaking the law, and therefore making themselves criminals, which is interesting. But long story short, movie opens up with one of the Watchmen being killed in a pretty epic action sequence. And what follows from there is one of the costume heroes. His name is Rorschach, played wonderfully here by Jackie Earle Haley. He thinks that, as he calls, a masked killer is on the loose, trying to kill the Watchmen. So what it follows is a pretty dense and layered and complex mystery thriller that really kind of gets to the heart of who this masked killer is and why he wants to kill the Watchmen. And I got to agree with you, Andy. This was one of those movies. I remember when it came out, the reaction to this was so divisive. It could not be more different. I remember one time this one family I knew, they actually took their 8-year-old kid to go see this movie. He was wearing his Batman outfit. He was excited. He was going to see superheroes on the big screen. Within a half hour, they leave the theater crying.
Yeah. Watchmen is not a family-friendly movie at all. There's a very several adult type situations.
Yeah, and I wonder who looks at the giant R rating and thinks, yeah, this is okay to take my 8-year-old kid to.
The same type of people that take their kid to the DMV with them and not do anything with them, hollering in the background and torturing everybody. Those are the type of people when they're my friend.
Pretty much. But yeah, so Watchmen, as I say, is very grounded in reality. It's very R-rated. It's very graphic. It's very violent. It deals with a lot of really heavy adult themes. But that's one of the things I really like about this movie. Out of all the comic book movies that have come out in the past 10, 15 plus years, Watchmen is the one that feels the most fallible. Its heroes aren't these gleaming, Boy Scout heroes like Captain America, Spider-Man, or Superman, or nothing like that. These are all human beings with very, very real character flaws. In other words, Watchmen treats its superheroes like people. And
Yeah,
I really appreciate that. I really appreciate how it can take these heroes with, really higher than, larger than life kind of appearances, and all that stuff. Bring them down and show them, hey, some of them are dealing with homelessness. Some of them are dealing with, getting out in touch with humanity. Some of them are dealing with impotence. Like it's interesting to see this movie dive into these heroes and treat them like people. That was something I've always appreciated about The Watchmen, and I appreciate about that now, several years later after watching it.
yeah, I think it's a great movie. In my opinion, it was definitely underappreciated, and just it's one of those kind of hidden gems, so to speak. Like you said, I like the reality of this. These guys aren't the shining beacon of truth, justice, and the American way like Superman. They have a little bit of dirt on them. They're gritty, they're raw, uh, they're emotional about things.
Sometimes they have literal blood on their hands.
Yeah, they have personal problems that they're dealing with, and some of them treat being a superhero as as a noble cause for good, while others feel it's more of a way to make money or to just be extremely violent for no reason because they're superheroes and there's no repercussion to them. And I like that grittiness to it. I mean, I like how it's set in a alternate timeline in the 70s and 80s, and alternate 20th century. Let's put it like that. And
Yeah,
and I really like that, and I I think that also makes it work as well. And I just think I appreciate really good writing, and this has that, and more.
yeah, I definitely got to agree with you, Andy. I really, speaking of the time period for a second, I really love how this film has a very distinct feel to where it takes place. I know in other superhero stories, they go with some far removed location like Metropolis or Gotham or Themyscira, but this is 1985 America. It has an identity, and you feel it throughout the whole movie. Richard Nixon is in the movie. He's the president. He's been elected like 3 or 4 times. The Kennedy assassination is portrayed here. Vietnam is being portrayed here. You can see in the background, you can see the World Trade Center, both the towers standing up. There's even a funny line in this movie where Ronald Reagan announces he's running for president, and somebody throws it off like nobody wants a cowboy in the White House, So that was kind of humorous. So I do love the time and the setting this takes place and how well it's realized. Speaking to the writing, I do think there's some parts of it where it brisks pretty quickly through the events of the book.
True.
There's just some parts where I feel like if they took some time to develop it a little more, let it breathe a little bit, not go through so quickly, it might feel a little more organic. It might feel a little more real, I guess I'd say. But that's also an advantage to the movie because it is so faithful to the comic book. It's a matter of public record that the director Zack Snyder, he didn't use storyboards for this movie, or rather he used limited storyboards. They literally used pages from the graphic novel when storyboarding this movie to give it that distinct visual style and edge. And I love that. I'm like, that's kind of amazing. I kind of want more superhero movies to do that. Not that you have to adapt the comic books verbatim, panel for panel, but at least looking at the distinct visual style, the textures, the colors, the artistry. Zack Snyder adapted that very, very vividly, and visually, the movie's unmatched. Honestly, I'm kind of shocked it wasn't nominated for visual effects at the Oscars.
Yeah, but I would have to say for a movie that's 2 hours and 42 minutes long, they did a good job with what they had.
Yeah,
And for Hollywood, where you can only squeeze in so much on screen, they got a lot in. They gave audiences a lot to really understand this dystopian world, even if you weren't a fan of the comic book or you never even heard of them. Um, unlike myself, which read this growing up. Uh, I personally, I think it's comparable to Frank Miller's version of Sin City. I mean, it
yeah,
has that kind of feel to it, as in a graphic novel, and also when it was made for a large scale production on screen. Um, I think it's very good. I think it holds up very well. Uh, but it's definitely not a movie you want to take your kids to. It's not Superman
no.
at all. Don't. This is for an older adult crowd.
Which is, it's funny. It's not Superman, but Zack Snyder would go on to direct a Superman movie and then a Justice League movie later on. Like, it's interesting to see how time has grown past since then. But yeah, no, I agree. I really can't reinforce this enough. It's not a PG-13 movie. It's not a light R. It's a very, very hard R. Making an uncut version of this would be very, very easy, and Zack Snyder has. But again, I feel like that's also part of the movie's unique identity. Like, Watchmen is not Zack Snyder's Justice League. It's not the Avengers. It's not Spider-Man No Way Home. And it doesn't really need to be. It's kind of its own movie, its own identity, and it brings something unique and creative and down to earth in the superheroing world. I definitely had mixed reactions to this movie whenever it originally came out. Now that I'm older and I've kind of seen more of the ugliness that the Watchmen have had to see in their universe, I definitely relate to the content a lot more in this movie.
No, I agree. I think I was kind of a little bit more harsh when it originally came out, but now looking at it back many years later, I think he did a fantastic job. So, out of one to 10, what do you give this here?
I'm going to give it a solid 8. In terms of adapting the content, it's a 10, hands down, because of how much it captures from the graphic novel in terms of the visual style, in terms of the story, in terms of the characters, the performances, all of that it does very, very well. Where I think it falters is the pacing. It skips through a little too quickly. Part of me wonders if this movie wasn't a movie, but instead was explored as like a 12 episode miniseries. I almost feel like that'd be better a little bit.
Yeah,
But in terms of a movie, in terms of taking this massive, widely cherished graphic novel of all time and crushing into a 2.5 hour movie, Zack Snyder did a very, very fine job. And at the very least, the movie is very, very unique in the superhero genre. At the very least, this many years later, you can't say another movie out there is like Watchmen. And that alone is an achievement worth celebrating.
definitely. I'm with you on this. I give it an 8 as well. I love the grittiness of this movie. I love the dark humor that is scattered throughout this movie. It has a great, unique story, and it's something different that Marvel or DC wouldn't really get into. And it's always good to see something from a different storyteller who has a unique story to bring to the table. And for, like I said, a 2 hour and 42-minute movie, I think Zack Snyder did a very good job in the limited time span he had. And since it's released in 2009, I think it does hold up well. I agree with you. Some details were definitely rushed a little bit, but overall, I think it's a very solid, very rewatchable movie many times over.
Yeah, it's there's a reason why Zack Snyder has such a massive following and why his DC films in particular have been such a hit for fans. Now, granted, He's also had some DC failures. I'm looking at you, Batman versus Superman. But his wins are greater than his losses, and
Yeah.
Watchmen is definitely an example of
I would say he's batting 300.
that. Nice one. I appreciate that reference. I understood that reference.
I'm glad you did. It wasn't very subtle. So that's going to do it for today's edition of the Critics Corner. So if you have any thoughts, suggestions, or just movies you'd like to see us review, or just chat movies with us, feel free and send us an email, leave a comment in the section below, and we'll get back with you. So that will do it for today, and we'll see you next week here at the cinema.
See you next week, everybody.